You're watching the History Fella channel, and in this video we're looking at Elizabeth Cady Stanton. Elizabeth Stanton was born on November the 12th, 1815, and would die on October the 26th, 1902. Stanton was an American writer and activist who was the leader of the women's rights movement in the US during the mid to late 19th century. She was the main force behind the 1848 Seneca Falls Convention, the first convention to be called for the sole purpose of discussing women's rights, and was the primary author in its Declaration of Sentiments. Her demand for women's right to vote generated a controversy at the convention, but quickly became a central tenet of the women's movement. She was also active in other social reform activities, especially abolitionism. In 1851, she met Susan B. Anthony and formed a decades-long partnership that was crucial to the development of women's rights movement. During the American Civil War, they established the Women's Loyal National League to campaign for the abolition of slavery, and they led it in the largest petition drive in the US history up to that time. They started a newspaper called The Revolution in 1868 to work for women's rights. After the war, Stanton and Anthony were the main organisers of the American Equal Rights Association, which campaigned for equal rights for both African Americans and women, especially the right of suffrage. When the 15th Amendment to the US Constitution was introduced that would provide suffrage for black men only, they opposed it, insisting that suffrage should be extended to all African Americans and all women at the same time. Others in the movement supported the amendment, resulting in a split. During the bitter arguments that led up to the split, Stanton sometimes expressed her ideas in elitist and racially condescending language. In her opposition to the voting rights of African Americans, Cady was quoted to have said, "It becomes a serious question whether we had better stand aside and let Sambo walk into the kingdom first." Frederick Douglass, an abolitionist friend who had escaped from slavery, reproached her for such remarks. Stanton became the president of the National Women's Suffrage Association, which she and Anthony had created to represent their wing of the movement. When the split was healed more than 20 years later, Stanton became the first president of the United Organization, the National American Women's Suffrage Association. This was largely an honorary position. Stanton continued to work on a wide range of women's rights, and despite the organization's increasingly tight focus on women's right to vote, Stanton was the primary author of the first 3 volumes of the history of the women's suffrage, a massive effort to record the history of the movement, focusing largely on her wing of it. She was also the primary author of the Women's Bible, a critical examination of the Bible that is based on the premise that its attitude towards women reflects prejudice from a less civilized age.